إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونسترضيه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله تعالى فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وحليله بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة وكشف الله به الغمة وتركها على المحجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله تعالى وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة فهي في النار. أما بعد, proceed brothers and sisters. Today's topic is the one that's near and dear to my heart. I was recently in Al-Aqsa Mosque, about 2 days ago in fact. And so today's entire topic is really based off of my own experience and based on my understandings and tadabburs of Surah Al-Isra. So if you're familiar with Surah Al-Isra, it starts by a very metaphysical moment. So it starts by talking about Al-Isra, which if you don't know is basically the ascension of the Prophet or the transport of the Prophet from this whole story of Isra al-Mi'raj, is the transport of the Prophet from Mecca to Jerusalem and from Jerusalem to the skies, to the heaven. So Al-Isra is a very metaphysical moment, the unseen, right? So the theme of this topic is transforming our connection from the unseen to the seen. Why do I say this? I say this because if you look at Surah Al-Isra, and if you do some tadabbur, and tadabbur means to think through the Quran and to really have deeper reflections, which is different than tafsir, which is interpretation. So tadabbur is open to anyone. Tafsir is left to scholars. You should do tadabbur. In fact, we should all be doing tadabbur. So transforming your connection from the unseen, this moment which doesn't really seem like it would have a lot of impact on my day-to-day, right? What is the story of the Prophet going from his bed at night in Mecca to the heavens to speak to Allah and then coming back have to do with me? A very metaphysical moment. And you notice in that surah, in fact, it becomes very practical. So what we'll talk about today is how can we connect between those topics. The unseen, the ghaib. So ghaib means what you cannot see. And the shahada, which is the things that you can see with your eyes and that are sense-oriented. Right? So the first thing is, so we've discussed a little bit around what Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj is, but to specify that the ayah says, it starts with the beginning of Surah Al-Isra, which says, سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا. So it says, glory be to him, praised is he who took his slave, his abd, by nighttime from Masjid al-Haram, which is in Mecca, to al-Masjid al-Aqsa, which is in Jerusalem. الذي باركنا حوله, and around which that, meaning that Masjid al-Aqsa, we place blessing. So you see, beginning of the surah immediately is talking about the unseen, something you were never party to. In fact, nobody else was party to except for the Prophet and those who he met, the prophets and the angels and so on that he met on his journey. But it starts with that immediately. And then the next ayah says, the surah starts going on to talking about Bani Israel. It says, وَآتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابَ وَجَعَلْنَاهُ هُدًى لِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ أَلَّا تَتَّخِذُوا مِن دُونِي وَكِيلًا. So immediately jumps into talking about, do not find anyone else that you will depend on except for me. So Allah is saying to Bani Israel and to us, the children of Israel's, not the Jews, and to us, depend on me. Look to me for your assurances, for your understanding of the world, for your understanding of what you need to know. Which makes a lot of sense because the surah goes on in many different ways. Talk about how it is important to imbue everything in your life with an understanding of how Allah would ask you to, apply His rulings and what He wants you to do. A very simple way to look at this, even from a very basic perspective, is how many times is the word Quran mentioned in any surah outside of Surah Al-Isra at once? It's mentioned, in fact, 4 times at most in each of the other surahs. So each surah will have the word Quran 4 times. Surah Al-Isra has the word Quran 11 times. So almost triple the amount of times is the word Quran mentioned. Why is that? It's to guide you to the idea that the connection between the seen and the unseen is this book. And if you think about it, the Quran is really a connection between the seen and the unseen. We all hold it. There's many copies all over the masjid if you want to find them. You can probably find one at home, hopefully. And it's very close to your hands. In fact, it should be on your hands often. It's very seen. But in some ways, it's very unseen. This is the words of Allah. How do the words of Allah end up in your hands? That's Allah's gift to you. It's your ability to make connections. So that's the first part that's very essential, right? Is to understand that the Quran is that connection, is that immediate channel, that tunnel. We don't have any other tunnel that takes us right to the seen, right to the unseen, back to the seen, back to the unseen. When you're reading it, talks to you a little bit about Jannah, talks to you a little bit about what you do with your wife, talks to you a little about what you do when you go visit somebody else, talks to you a little bit about Nar and Jannah. And immediately there's always these connections that we make. And in fact, that's why the ayahs then go on in Surah Al-Isra to say, إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ يَهْدِي لِلَّتِي هِيَ أَقْوَمُ وَيُبَشِّرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ الَّذِينَ يَعْمَلُونَ الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ أَجْرًا كَبِيرًا. And so it tells you, this Quran, this book, guides you to that which is greater. Aqwam is uslub tafdeel. Uslub tafdeel means to use a grammatical form which indicates preference. So not only does the Quran tell you what's a good thing to do, it tells you what's the better option. You ever have a chance to look at two things and you're like, I don't know what's better here? Quran does that for you. Is it better to approach somebody's house from the back or someone's house from the front? From the front. Those don't seem like two different things. They seem like just regular things to think about. But Allah gives you the better, higher option. Is it better to be forgiving or is it better to be just? It's better to be forgiving. Allah tells you that. So it gives you the chance to always reconcile what's better and what's more preferred rather than what I would want to do. Because by nature, and that's what the surah then goes on to talk about, by nature, we are very selfish beings, right? We are very transgressive beings. That's not because we're bad people. You know, sometimes you have this idea that maybe I'm a bad person, and we kind of are in some ways, right? But at the same time, Allah told us that your human condition, we are made in a way where we will be transgressive, we will be ignorant, we will be selfish. And how do we curb those desires? How do we stop ourselves from those transgressive attitudes? Quran. And so what it does is that it gives you the opportunity to understand, okay, there's something that I need to be doing that's very practical. It's very practical. And the beautiful thing is, so if you have a chance to go through these different ayahs, inshallah, when you get to reflect on the surah by yourself, I hope that you will, do this action as well. You'll notice that the surah starts to become very practical about how you just interact with your day to day. But it starts by talking about something which seems very simple to understand. So once we go past, this idea of the Quran leading you to the best things to do and the more preferred things to do, it says, اقرأ كتابك كفى بنفسك اليوم عليك حسيبا. Read your own book. It is indeed today, and so this is speaking about the Day of Judgment, better for you and enough for you to be your own accountability partner, basically. Be your own accountant. Hasib means someone who counts. So, in essence, on the Day of Judgment, those who are most successful, which is what Hassan al-Basri says, will be those who were most successful in accounting for themselves in this dunya, in this world. The more often you could become aware, the more often you can have this idea to understand, okay, what do I need to be doing? How should today look? How should tomorrow look? What should my priorities be? Who should I care for? Should I even be caring for other people at all? The more you can have that awareness and analysis, the better your ability will be to be in line with what the Quran is asking you, to do, and ultimately to be in line with what is best to do as a Muslim and find success on the Day of Judgment. So having these concrete directives is the way to reach abstract pleasures. What I mean by that is, Jannah doesn't make sense. How does it make sense that there's a thing that consistently gets better forever? How does it make sense that there's a thing where every single thing that you want, that I want, that he wants, can all happen at the same time? In this world, if I want something, that means somebody else can't have it. That's just how the world works, right? When I take a $10,000 from my company, that's $10,000 somebody else doesn't have. But if I take $10,000 in the Day of Judgment, or in Jannah, somebody else can also have $10,000, right? Hopefully we don't have dollars in Jannah, right? But you get the idea. So what's purely directed to you as an individual, to me as an individual, is very clear from the beginning of the surah. Read the Quran, it helps you to be guided to the better things to do. That's how you connect to the seen and the unseen. Find within yourself the highest level of accountability, and then ultimately, once you are able to connect to those concrete things, recognize that it's very, very simple to go off the path. Recognize that even in the Quran it says here, من كان يريد العاجلة عجلنا له فيها ما نشاء لمن نريد ثم جعلنا له جهنم يصلاها مذموما مدحورا. So he who wants this world, the easiest option, the most instant gratification, we'll give him that. You get it. There's a lot of Elon Musk out there and so on, right? They have the most instant gratification you'll ever see in your life. But he who wants, and he will get what he wants, and then he will get Jahannam. So if all you want is this life, it's easy. Your trade-off is, I don't want the next life. When people say, it's not fair that non-believers get eternal, hell, well, it kind of makes sense if all you wanted was this life anyway, right? You're never asking for anything else. So Allah is telling you, if you want more than that, وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ وَسَعَيَ لَهَا سَعْيَهَا وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. Those who want more than that, who ask for more than that, who demand more than that, will be given more than that as long as they're in a state of faith, and their work or their amal will be recompensated in gratitude. Given the lack of time that we have, I'm just going to take a pause here, inshallah, and then we'll share some more concrete directives in the second khutbah. Astaghfirullah al-mudu ilayh. الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى وعلى صحبه المجتبى. There's a very clear connection here between the seen and unseen, and just to make it even more clear, recognize that the ayahs, the verses in this surah go on to talk about things that don't even seem like they would have anything to do with the beginning of the surah at all. What does the story of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, the Prophet going from Mecca to the skies and coming back, have to do with being good to your parents? What does it have to do with giving charity? What does it have to do with being kind to those around you? What does it have to do with not wanting to speak on things you don't have knowledge of? What does that have to do with avoiding, sins? In fact, it has everything to do with it. Because they call this in a lot of sciences positive feedback loops, right? When you perform good actions, and in the deen it makes a lot of sense, your heart becomes purified. When your heart becomes purified, you perform better action. So there's a connected feedback loop. You can't start having a dichotomy between the way that you act and the way that you want your heart to be. If you want to be a kind person, you have to have kind actions, and so on and so forth. So what the Quran is telling you here is all those unseen things about your soul, about how you will end up as a human being, about what your fate will look like in the alam al-ghayb, in the world that we cannot see. Well, there are tangible things you do here. So it starts by talking about being kind to your parents, being dutiful to your parents to the extent that when they become older, when they reach old age and they're stubborn and they're difficult to deal with and all those things that people will say about older people, that's when you have to be the most kind. In fact, it doesn't talk about parents in just perpetuity. It doesn't just say parents. It says especially when to you they're the most difficult to deal with, because you were the most difficult to deal with when you were a baby. And then it goes on to talk about Allah knowing what's deep inside of you and knowing what goes on in your mind and what goes on in your heart. So being clear of having a clear conscience around others, not holding grudges. One of the Sahaba was told, or was spoken of, that he was one of the Mubashirin bil Jannah, one of the people that was promised Jannah. So the Prophet was asked, why was this person, or the Prophet had said that he was promised Jannah. So this man was asked, what do you think you were promised Jannah for? So he said, I never did more prayers than anybody else. I never gave more than anybody else. I was just a regular Sahabi. But I never slept, and there was anything in my heart of enmity or hatred towards any other Muslim. That's enough, right? And that's why Allah says, رَبُّكُمْ أَعْلَمُ مَا فِي نُفُوسِكُمْ. Allah knows what's inside of it. And so on and so on and so forth. And we could just keep going through the ayahs until, I need to leave this khutbah, right? But the idea that we take away is basically this. In all of your life, there are rare moments that you have to transform your life forever, right? Allah gives you a heart that starts off as white, clean, pure. And then there are these black dots that happen because of sin. So you could sit here, listen to me. I could sit here, listen to myself. We can say, oh, what a wonderful, concept, seen and the unseen and Quran and all these things. But then we just go back to the rest of our lives and none of that was useful. I could walk away from all of these different conversations that I've just had with you, and none of it would mean anything if we don't cause real change. This trip to Aqsa really reminded me of this very important concept, parable in the Quran. And it says, and it talks about not being able to see change. You don't see change. Do we see change in our ummah today? Does Pakistan look a lot better in terms of how the government is the past 50 years ago? Egypt look a lot better? Does Palestine look a lot better? Does the story of what's happening to the Uyghurs look a lot better? It's difficult to see that. Inshallah, it's getting better. But sometimes it's very difficult to see that. But what does the Quran say? It says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ وَإِذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِقَوْمٍ سُوءًا فَلَا مَرَدَّ لَهُ وَمَا لَهُم مِّن دُونِهِ مِن وَالٍ. Allah will not change what afflicts a people unless they change what is within themselves. So if you are one of those people, and I am sometimes one of those people, who sits around and complains about, oh, the Zionists doing this, oh, our leaders doing that, this, and this. That's useless. That's not what Allah told you to do. It's important to remember these things, and we preach about these things so these things are known. So, if seeing the injustices and being aware of them and communicating them is an important facet. But Allah didn't tell you that's how you get rid of the injustice people, the unjust people. Injustice is not dealt with that way, right? There's another, hadith where the Prophet says, min a'malikum sullita alayhim, or min a'malikum sullita alaykum. So from your own actions will be people that will be afflicted upon you. Our actions have direct correlation. So when the Isra al Mi'raj story talks about all these metaphysical, unseen, things, one of the most unseen things is change. The transformative change is real population development, seeing our ummah go where we want it to go. And that happens by you and me embracing that the things that are in that surah, those prescriptions of the actions that we need to incorporate, the souls that we need to purify, that's us. That's not Mubarak or Sisi or, insert political figure here, right? So may Allah allow us to purify ourselves. May Allah allow us to give ourselves the best therapy, the best medicine, which is the Quran. May Allah allow us to bring within ourselves change which causes grander change for the ummah and stop being passive Muslims and start being the agents of change in the generation which changes the ummah forever. Allahumma hadina fi man hadayt, wa afina fi man afayt, wa tawallana fi man tawallayt, wa barik Allahumma lana fi ma a'tayt, wa qina wasrif anna sharra ma qaddarta wa qadayt, innaka taqdi bil haqqi wa la yuqda alayk, innahu la yadhillu man walayta wa la ya'izzu man 'adayt. تباركت ربنا وتعاليت نستغفرك اللهم ونتوب إليك اللهم ارحم موتانا وموتى المسلمين واشف مرضانا ومرضى المسلمين اللهم اقض الدين على المدينين وفرج كرب المكروبين اللهم إنا نسألك شفاء عاما وبرءا من السقم اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة.